Welcome to the Explainer. You know, for any high-stakes project, there's this incredible tool for looking into the future to stop disasters before they even start. Yep, today we're talking about the Premortem, a forensic audit of future failure. Okay, so let's just dive right in. I want you to imagine the absolute worst-case scenario. Your project is completely collapsed. The brand is toxic. I know, it feels a little grim, but trust me, looking back from a failure that hasn't even happened yet, that's the secret sauce to preventing it. This isn't about being a pessimist, not at all. It's about being a strategist.
So why is this so powerful? Well, to really get it, we first need to understand these two competing forces that are always at play inside any big project. It's kind of like this constant tug of war between hitting the gas and slamming on the brakes.
So on one side, you've got this creative, divergent engine. That's your gas pedal, right? Generating this huge spectrum of wild, out-there ideas. But then on the other side, you've got the convergent brakes. This is the critical thinking part, the system that filters all those ideas through the hard reality of logic and feasibility. Real, true innovation, that only happens when those two are working together perfectly.
All right, so imagine this. You've been flooring that creative gas pedal. You've got this brilliant idea, you're all set to launch, but how do you apply those critical brakes at just the right time? Before it's too late and you end up as just another cautionary tale.
This is where we hit a really critical point in the design thinking process. Stage 4, the apply stage. This is when we stop creating and start, trying to break what we've just created. It's like we're moving from the shiny design studio right into the crash test facility. We're running a full-on forensic audit before we even think about hitting the gas. And the main tool we use for this audit is called the Premortem. It runs on this fascinating psychological principle called Prospective Hindsight. Now, this is a really subtle but incredibly powerful mental flip. You stop asking what might go wrong. Instead, you just assume the absolute worst. The project has failed spectacularly. The patient is dead. Now what? Now you act like a forensic team and ask, what did go wrong?
Okay, so that sounds intense, right? But how do you actually do this forensic audit on a project that, for all intents and purposes, is perfectly healthy right now? Well, it's actually more straightforward than you might think.
It boils down to a super clear 4-step process. Step 1, preparation. You get everyone in a room and you vividly imagine total epic failure. Step 2, generate reasons. This is key. Individually, everyone writes down every single possible reason for this disaster. Doing it solo is crucial to avoid groupthink. Step 3, consolidate. Now you share everything, you group the risks, and you start to find what they call the wicked problems. Those complex, thorny issues with no easy fix. And finally, step 4, adjust. You go back to your original plan and you build in guardrails and specific strategies to deal with those key risks you just uncovered.
And this framework you're seeing here, it's basically the roadmap for that whole process. It walks your team from that kind of uncomfortable place of imagining disaster all the way through the analysis and lands you in a place where you're building a much, much stronger and more resilient strategy. You're literally working backward from a fake failure to make your project stronger today.
Now, I want to be clear, this isn't just some academic exercise you do in a conference room with stale coffee. Some of the biggest, most successful, and most highly regulated companies in the world use this exact kind of thinking to shield themselves from absolute catastrophe.
I mean, look at JPMorgan. They had this huge problem, right? How do we tap into the incredible power of AI while also maintaining the kind of ironclad security a global bank needs? Their solution was pure premortem thinking. They basically assumed every single AI model would fail by default. The rule was simple. No model gets used, period, until it's registered and put through a brutal testing process. It's that classic crawl, walk, run approach.
So JPMorgan's method is all about control, being super careful. But what if you took it a step further? What if you decided to deliberately try and break your own system, just to see where the limits are? I mean, it's one thing to prepare for failure. It's a whole other thing to invite it over for dinner.
And that's exactly where you get wild tools like Netflix's famous Chaos Monkey. This is literally a program that runs around their own systems and randomly shuts down servers, on purpose. Why? The goal is to force their engineers to build systems that are resilient to failure, not just systems that try to avoid it. And inspired by that, DBS Bank made their own version, and you gotta love the name, the Wreckoon. It does the same thing. It intentionally injects failures into their digital infrastructure to make sure their systems can actually heal themselves.
And to guide this intentional chaos,
The Wreckoon process at DBS uses these 6 critical questions. They really act as a structured way to imagine all the ways things could go wrong. It forces teams to challenge every single assumption they have, from the customer experience all the way to what their competitors might do. And it uncovers risks that a normal happy path planning process would just completely miss.
Okay, so this brings up a really important point. How should we think about all this? Because, let's be honest, it could easily be mistaken for just being negative or cynical. But it's actually the exact opposite.
Running a premortem isn't pessimism. It's professionalism. The best analogy I've heard is a pilot running through their pre-flight checklist. They're not sitting there hoping for engine failure, right? Of course not. They are systematically, professionally ensuring the integrity of the plane before a very high-stakes journey. That is exactly what this process does for your project.
And at the end of the day, this whole thing is really a tool to fight against what psychologists call the invisible gorilla effect. You might have heard of this famous experiment where people are told to count basketball passes. While they're laser-focused on that, a person in a full gorilla suit walks right through the middle of the scene. And most people, they don't even see it. It's a perfect example of how we get tunnel vision. A premortem forces the team to stop counting the passes and start actively looking for that gorilla.
And that really leaves us with one final and I think pretty powerful question. What's the invisible gorilla that your team isn't seeing right now? What catastrophic but maybe totally obvious risk could this forensic tool help you find before it's too late?